Good morning, Rise and Freedom. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Is the Biden economy getting you down? Maybe you've thought about getting a second job to make up for the lost wages for inflation. Well, be careful because some employers are out there calling your second job theft. Just wait until we hear about this thing called taxation. I'll have Missouri State Rep Tony LaVasco on at 7:03 to discuss. And I can't believe it. Maybe I just should start being more skeptical in general, but Joe Biden actually did the ice cream meme. The president was asked his thoughts on the economy, and I've got a video of his response while he eats expensive ice cream. And have you checked your 401k lately? Well, here's a tip. Don't. At 7:30 a.m., climate hookers threw tomato soup on a masterpiece of artwork by Vincent van Gogh. Similar copycat acts of retardation have played out as the useful idiots of the climate communist cadre continue to crack on about crap they have little knowledge of. And at 8 a.m., Brad Palumbo joins us fresh off his SmackDown appearance on Dr. Phil. It's boomers versus zoomers. Palumbo took the ignorant lefties on of his generation, and he also took on the boomers as well on the popular daytime talk show, and he absolutely handed them their asses. We'll show the clip, we'll talk to him, and we'll discuss the fallout. And finally, Obama says that cancel culture leftists are a huge buzzkill. Whoa, man. Finally, something the former president says that we can agree with. We'll listen to that clip and we'll talk about it. And finally, sorry about the missed show last week. Some of my equipment got damaged in transit to Florida. I know, that sucked. But I've got some videos and photos to share with you of the amazing trip, and we'll talk about scuba diving at the end. A couple of quick announcements. Today is YouTube Monday. So please join us over on YouTube this morning at AP for Liberty and chat over there. Also, if you're a big Tim Pool fan, then I'll be joining him on his show this Friday. So please make sure to tune in and support. I'll be truly grateful. Now, joining us on the line here, let's bring in Tony LaVasco. Good morning, Tony. Thanks so much for joining him on the program this morning.
Good morning, Austin. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for coming in here, Tony. Do you? I know you're a big fan of actually being able to do the good work for the people, but I mean, I guess it's kind of a good thing sometimes when the legislature is not in session. So, for those of you who are just new to Tony, would you mind just kind of tell us what you do when you're not a state representative here in the Missouri, so we can get a little bit about your professional background?
Well, sure. I sell used computer equipment. Work for a subsidiary of a big leasing firm, and they take equipment that comes back from corporate lease, and they refurbish it, rehab it, that sort of thing, and I sell it. So it's actually a lot bigger business than you'd think. There's a lot of equipment that just kind of floating out there that needs homes, and we make sure it stays out of landfill.
Nice. Okay. So, you actually have an honest job when you're not State Representative Tony LaVasco. That's good to hear. I've read that as much as $6,000 has been lost in the average American worker's paycheck due to inflation over the last year, Tony. A lot of people are hurting and saying to themselves, oh, maybe I need to get a second job. Maybe I need to get even a third job. And then I ran into this article that made me think of you because I know you work in tech. And the article title was Tech CEO Calls Overemployment Trend a, quote, new form of theft and deception after they fired two engineers secretly working multiple full-time jobs at once. I sent this article over to you, Tony. What was your thoughts of it?
It's interesting. I think a lot of articles like that, they kind of bait you in with that headline. And then once you actually read the details, it's usually a little bit more nuanced than the headline suggests. And this is a great example. So in this particular case, it sounds like the couple of employees that weren't actually doing their jobs, which is kind of an important piece of information for the viewers to know here. So I think that most folks would probably articulate that clocking into a job, if you're an hourly worker, and then not actually doing any work, probably not super ethical, right? But different than what a lot of people are doing, which is getting either, kind of gig work, by the job pay, salaried work, and then improving their efficiency, figuring out, hey, look, I'm getting paid for 8 hours worth of work. If I can get 8 hours worth of work done before 3 o'clock, I could clock into a different job and do some work after that. And I think that's very different when it comes to ethics, because if you're actually putting that output out that you're, well, they should be fairly pleased with you. And as long as they're and they're not complaining, then, I don't see a problem with you switching gears and going. But if you're just flat out not doing the work and pretending like you're showing up, that's a whole different goal.
Yeah, for sure. If you're just tuning into the show this morning, I'm speaking to Missouri State Representative Tony Lavasco about what's being called overemployment. You can text the show this morning at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. Now, Tony, I've been reading a lot of articles that are like this, and certainly this one didn't contain the information about the people just being lazy, but there are a lot of employers who are concerned about the fact that, they've got people who are remote workers and they're going home and they're doing two jobs essentially at once. But I mean, if you're performing, if you're producing the kind of results that each employer wants and getting your job done, I mean, it seems to me that, one, people need these jobs probably in order to keep up with what they're losing for inflation. And two, it's providing them the kind of opportunities, as long as they're, again, not actually, slacking at their job. I mean, it's something that I think should be encouraged, because so many CEOs and employers, they're trying to hire. They're desperate to hire. They complain on one hand about the great resignation, and then on the other hand, they complain when they've got somebody who wants to work for them, but also has a second job. I mean, they can't really have it both ways, can they?
No, and I think one of the things that we're trending away from finally as a society is kind of metrics for measuring performance. It used to be that there was kind of this mantra that, well, if you're at the job, you're supposed to be there working on your employer's work for the entire duration, and anything less is just you're taking advantage. And you had people that were very militaristic about like how long you took for break, how long your lunch was, that sort of thing. And now we've kind of moved past that to a society where it's a lot more common to look at the overall picture. Are you doing the job that you were hired to do well and at a reasonable rate? And more specifically, are you meeting those benchmarks? Are you exceeding those expectations? And if you are, a lot of employers are recognizing that they're going to get more performance out of people if you don't micromanage them and sit there with a day. I would imagine working remotely is going to have to be even more so in that vein, because not only do you not have someone that's a manager that's directly standing over someone to make sure that every moment of the day that they're grinding away, but on top of that, you literally only see their output. You don't see their work process like you would if you've got somebody standing over them in an office. And so it seems to me we ought to be encouraging employees to maximize their efficiency in whatever way works best for them. And ultimately, good management is deciding, well, maybe we got to cut you loose because you're just not producing that output.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Now, the problem, of course, seems to be with how employers measure the productivity of their employees. Quest Fanning over on YouTube says it's often hard to figure a metric for what you want from a worker. I imagine it is. But I mean, Tony, some of this has got to be those middle management workers who are desperate to hold on to their jobs. And if they're not able to sit there and look over an employee's shoulder, then they don't look busy themselves. And a lot of these middle management workers, their job really is just to look busy, because the employees can do the jobs themselves as long as the job is getting done. So, I mean, a big problem with this is that people don't know how to measure productivity.
Well, and I think a lot of that's the fault of the management. Those middle managers, as you say, their primary function is to assign tasks to their workers, so that they've always got more tasks available than perhaps they can reasonably get done in a given day. But that the employee doesn't necessarily have to go looking around for work to do. They have their list of things that they're expected to take care of, and as long as they're meeting that on a reasonable basis, then they should be good. But if you have management that's deciding that, well, they'd like to check out, they'd like to not necessarily do their jobs, and they like to pass the buck on to the employee, whether or not they should be working on a particular task, that's when you start getting into these problems, I think, because when you expect that lower level worker to start looking for things to do, well, big surprise, they're not going to. That's not really why you're paying them. That's what the management's function is. And so, that balance there.
Right, if you're just tuning into the show this morning, I'm speaking to Missouri State Representative Tony Lavasco. You can send us a text this morning at 573-319-1586. Wood Hippie text in this morning, says he's watching on the YouTube. Glad you're back. He's got several rants on low boil. FBI, Saudi Arabia, and Democrats. We'll definitely have to hear from Wood Hippie later on in the show. Now, Tony, when it comes to worker productivity, my problem is this, and again, I feel like I'm sounding more and more like a commie as this show has gone on, as I've sort of been freed from my corporate overlords and as I work for myself here. But one of the things that you'll frequently find with socialists is that socialists will analyze a problem correctly, but their solution is always wrong. And we have this, increasing productivity for workers. We just keep increasing our productivity. Our productivity just goes up and up and up, but our wages have remained stagnant. Why is that? Why have wages remained stagnant when the average American's workers' productivity has continued to rise over the decades?
Well, I think that's pretty straightforward. I think taking more and more from businesses and shuffling it away to people that are not being productive. I think that anytime you've got government that is adding either a regulatory burden or, quite directly a tax burden, that's going to take away a portion of those profits that businesses will bring in that they can't give back to their workers. And so a lot of times businesses, when they're being squeezed like that, they're going to have to decide, well, are they going to just cut staff entirely, or are they going to just try to squeeze a little bit more productivity out of the people that they've got? You're going to have a imbalance that you wouldn't normally see. Businesses want to reward their workforce is doing well because they retain the good workers. That's how that process works. And I think that's part of why we're seeing so many businesses struggling to keep people nowadays, is that they can't quite afford to pay them or compensate them in other ways, commiserate with some of their competition, because of the fact that there's just so many forces on them externally that just makes it just financially no longer viable to keep up their business model in the way that they could 15 years ago.
And another metric that people point at is the stratification of wealth and corporate profits. I mean, Tony, we have seen corporate profits at record highs in previous years as well. I mean, a lot of that money that they, in theory, could have taken and used to increase wages has just gone to pad the bank accounts of the people at the very top of these corporations. So, I mean, a lot of times, again, you'll hear from Bernie Sanders and you'll see, right-wing populists and others who will rightly point out that a lot of these people who work for these corporations, they're not taking care of their employers and their employees, and their employees need the job. They can't quit their job because they, again, they're getting hit from the government on the inflation side, and they're not getting an increase in salary from their employers, but their employers are certainly paying the guys at the top, Tony. There are a lot of people, a small group of people at the top who are making bank, who make a lot of money, and then the rest of the people at the bottom, it's screw them. And I've seen it happen, Tony. I've seen it happen up close and in person in so many ways. You'll get those managers at the top that do almost nothing, contribute almost nothing to productivity, and they skim all of the money off the top, and they don't pass it down to their workers. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there's some government, rule for this, but when I see these headlines that say, "Oh, overemployment is theft" and all that kind of stuff, it kind of makes me feel, kind of screw you to the bosses. I kind of understand the way that some of these populists feel, don't you?
I can understand that impulse, and I think it's true to a certain extent. But I think there's a huge difference between analyzing what a Fortune 500 company's management structure and compensation might look like versus the average company that most Americans work for. The larger a company is, the more likely that they're going to over exaggerate the rewards that their top management are going to get, because quite frankly, those are very difficult jobs. Maybe they don't necessarily do all that much now, but they did to get there, right? You don't just start out as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, right? There's a progression there. But the reality is most Americans don't work for the big mega companies, right? They work for these medium to small businesses. And of course, small business is defined now as like 100 employees or something like that. That's not really that small. But most people that work for those size businesses, I think, would be really shocked to find how little their managers and even the CEOs make. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be quite a bit more than the average worker. But when you're looking at an employer that has 50, 100 employees, they're doing pretty well for themselves, but they're not fabulously wealthy in most cases. A lot of times their reward is coming later. It's equity in the business. It's what they get when they cash out and they sell that company to the big mega corporation down the line. That's where they're going to get their big payday. It's not usually on their W-2.
Point. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Missouri State Representative Tony LaVasco about this trend, what they're calling overemployment as theft. I mean, it's been very difficult to make a living in the last couple of years, Tony. I mean, people have been really, set on their back foot when it comes to the pandemic, and the employers are complaining about the Great Resignation, people not going back to work, and a lot of people have said, oh, well, it has to do with government paychecks, which ran out a long time ago, Tony. But another thing, like the Wall Street Journal has been calling it, is, they call it the Great Resignation, and they say it's because people got used to not working during the pandemic, which, yeah, I guess people got used to it. And listen, I don't think that we need to be like Europe in a lot of ways, but I mean, I just got back fresh from a vacation in the Keys, and God, it was just like so refreshing to the soul, Tony. The Europeans actually take more than just 2 weeks of vacation a year. Do I think productivity is good? Great. Yes. Do I think that growing the GDP is good? Great. Yes. But I mean, there's something to be said about like actually living your life, not waiting until you're almost dead before you actually go out there and enjoy your life. I mean, in some ways, I guess I'm envious of Europeans because they actually, they earn their money and they use it and they actually have time off. I mean, it almost seems as if people are just sick to death of being worked to death. Can you sympathize with that?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I can speak to personally is there's a great value in flexibility. And that's something that we're finally starting to see the larger corporations start to really kind of understand and recognize, is that when you give employees flexibility, whether it be how they do the job or in a lot of cases when they do the job, you can get a lot more work out of them without necessarily having to squeeze more hours. I can attest for the fact that, when I'm in session in Jefferson City, it's basically January through mid-May. And it is objectively more work than my day job back home when I return for the summer. But I got to tell you, it is a lot more satisfying and, generally speaking, a lot more relaxing, because in Jefferson City, I have the flexibility of setting my own schedule, appointments. A lot of what happens at the Capitol is a lot more unpredictable. Your day is different every day. And even if you might have a 10-hour day or a 12-hour day sprinkled through in that, maybe you might be a little tired at the end of the night, the difference that has versus you start at a certain time, you go to lunch at a certain time, you leave at a certain time, just the separation from that consistent and completely predictable schedule really does a lot to make it a lot more refreshing to go to work every day. And I think people are learning that the more they work from home and do these other types of less traditional employment options, that whether or not they're actually working more hours than they were before, they have a little bit more control over their lives. And I think that's what people are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I completely agree. Thanks so much for joining us on the show this morning. Tony LaVasco, Missouri State Representative. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you very much. What do you think of Tony LaVasco? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. When we come back, he actually did it. Joe Biden did the ice cream meme. It's out of touch. We're out of time. But you're out of my head when I'm not with you. Whoa. I gotta go, Hall & Oates. We'll be back with more Morning Show when we return at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes, As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning. Happy Monday. It's 7:49. It's time to rise in freedom. Welcome to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was the Boomer versus Zoomers smackdown. It was played out in the last week as our friend Brad Palumbo went on the Dr. Phil show and handed boomers and Zoomers, socialist boomers and Zoomers, their ass. It was awesome. And I'm going to play the clips for you now. My friend Brad Palumbo will be joining us this morning at 8 a.m. when we'll talk to him about his boomers versus Zoomers smackdown. All right, let's go to his very first one here this morning as I pull up this clip. I'm still a little rusty running the show because I've been out for a few days, so please forgive me as I get everything, because I get kind of back into the swing of things this morning. Here we go. Here's Brad's first calling out of the boomers. It's so delicious.
Baby boomers, silent generation, they lived beyond their means. They wanted all these benefits they weren't willing to pay for. It's up to $250,000 per taxpayer. We will be paying off what you guys enjoyed for the rest of our lives. So I'm sorry. I can see why we look at y'all and say, okay, boomer.
Oh my God, Brad Palumbo. So dang good. Oh man, let's give him some of that sweetness. Oh my God. You can see that Boomer's face on there. She's got that look where she she really wants to go. Look at that right there. Oh.
How dare you?
How dare you? Oh, it's so good. So good. Give him one of these.
Perfect.
Absolutely perfect. All right, let's get to the thrust. Let's get to the meat of his argument here, though. He says,
baby boomers, silent generation, they live beyond their means.
Amen.
All these benefits they weren't willing to pay for, it's up to $250,000 per taxpayer. We will be paying off what you guys enjoyed for the rest of our life. So I'm sorry. I can see why we look at y'all and say, okay, boomer.
Oh, that is some good stuff. Oh, Lord.
Perfect.
Yes, absolutely perfect, Brad Palumbo. Yes, the silent generation, the boomers, they have lived way beyond their means, and they have run up the national debt to $250,000 per person. I think when I first got into politics back in 2008, somebody check me on this one, tell me if I'm wrong. You can text the show 573-319-1586. But I think in 2008, the average per person taxpayer debt was only like $16,000 or something like that. The national debt was at such a point, we were like freaking out about the national debt being in the trillions. Now it's what, $30 trillion, and the average taxpayer owes $250,000 to the national debt. I mean, yeah, and it's all about living beyond their means. It reminds me a little bit of that time when they were doing the bailouts in 2008, and I was at that conservative meeting in D.C., and the conservatives were all like, they wanted the government to bail them out. They wanted their 401ks bailed out. They wanted the stimulus checks to go to Washington, D.C. They wanted the stimulus checks to go to all of their cronies in these big corporations that were sucking us dry. I mean, you have to understand, has a lot of money gone to welfare programs for like poor and middle class people in certain ways here and there? Yes, absolutely. But where has most of this money that they have stolen from us gone? Taxation being theft. Where has this money gone? It's gone to the rich. Most of the taxpayer dollars, the money that is being derived from us. Sorry, I'm looking for the word. It's Monday morning. I still need more coffee here. But most of the money that is being sucked out of us is going to the wealthy. It's going to the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, the military industrial complexes. It's going to the top. Your taxpayer dollars, they tell you it's for the roads. It's not for the friggin' roads. It's not going to the roads at all. It's going to the rich who have cronies, who are the cronies of the government officials that pass our cash out. And it's also going to the politicians, where they take that money and they put it in third world countries and places like Ukraine, and they launder that cash. And I wonder, there's a war in Ukraine, the country where they're laundering all of our politicians' money and all of this aid money that's supposed to go to poor people in these countries. Oh, let's help the poor people in these countries. It reminds me of that quote by Congressman Ron Paul, who said that foreign aid is stealing money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries. But now, domestic aid is stealing from poor people in rich countries like the United States and giving it to rich people in the United States. Am I wrong here? Send me a text, 573-319-1586. You can text us again, 573-319-1586. It's great to hear from you. What did communists use to light their homes before? Candles? Someone texted in. Light bulbs. That was a good joke, but the very first time I felt stupid the first time I heard that joke, because I was like, I don't get it, right? I had to think about it, right? It's kind of like, what do you mean? What did they use before? What did they use before they use light bulbs? Oh, that means that they regress, that they can't, they didn't have lights. All right, I'm an idiot. Another listener texted in and says, whoa, leave the Luddites alone. These climate dipshits are not the genetic material we need to advance. No kidding, no kidding. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. We've got another Brad Palumbo clip. Now, this is him taking on the Zoomers. He just did the smackdown on the boomers. Now we're going to get him doing it on the Zoomers. This is him taking on people of about his generation. Is he millennial or Zoomer? I guess we'll have to ask him when he comes on at 8 a.m. Okay, here we go, Brad. Take him on.
Stereotypes used in comedic stand-up is just like not okay anymore. So you can say whatever you want, but you need to be ready for like the repercussions of what you say.
Okay, you're not free to say whatever you want if you get fired for an off-color joke.
Okay,
how will you feel when it's you who's out of step with the social mores of the day?
Then you get the repercussions of what you said.
I think you're still acting like this is something new, though. People have been fired.
Well, I'm not, but two wrongs don't make a right.
Always the white liberal chicks.
Fired for things that they've said for forever. But now we're seeing an era where if you're disrespectful or bigoted towards someone, you get fired for that. I don't see that as a bad thing.
But it's a lot more.
See that as a bad thing. Oh God, I have so much to say about this one. Side note: I saw a white liberal chick reading White Fragility in the airport yesterday, as we were coming here, and it was just like everything I could. I was just like, oh God. Doing everything I could just to bite my lip and not have to say anything. I was like, please, just Austin, please just don't say anything. Don't say anything. Let's continue here. But I like what Brad Palumbo is saying here. He talks about you're not really, it's not really free speech if you lose your job for an off-color joke. This girl that you're looking at, by the way, if you're watching the show on video opposed to listening to the podcast later, this is the girl who did the famous OK Boomer meme. Anyways, continue on.
You get fired for an off-color joke.
Okay,
well, when it's you who's out of step with the social norms.
Okay, and then you get the repercussions of what you said.
I think you're still acting like this is something new, though. People have been fired.
Well, I'm not, but two wrongs don't make a right.
People have been fired for things that they've said for forever. But now we're seeing an era where if you're disrespectful or bigoted towards someone, you get fired for that. I don't see that as a bad thing.
But it's a lot more that's been caught up.
The point is, the threshold has really gotten low.
Yes. And I really want to address the idea that what's going on currently with regard to free speech is in any way normal. We checked our latest data on attempts to get professors canceled on campus. It's 770. It involves over 40 tenured professors getting fired. You didn't have these kind of numbers even during McCarthyism. So the idea that this is just business as usual is just wrong.
Good stuff. We got to talk to Brad Palumbo. We got to get him on the show here. He's going to be here in just a couple of minutes. Ew, boy. I got a lot to say about that. But maybe I should just let Brad say it because he said it the best. We'll talk to him when we get back on the Wake Up America show. Don't forget, it's YouTube Monday. Watch us over on YouTube today and comment there. We appreciate it very much. And we'll be back with more Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Austin's wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see. much less reading. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Do not come. Do not come.
Have you ever have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company?
You know, I don't know as a fact, but I doubt it.
Well, here's the thing is, why don't you let us know?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. It's 8:04, and you're watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. All right, everybody's been talking about Brad Polumbo over this weekend. They're sending me text messages saying, did you see Brad Polumbo on Dr. Phil? He killed it. It's the Boomers versus Zoomers segments that he did that are going viral on the internet. So I said, I've got to get Brad on the show first thing Monday morning, and he's here joining us right now. He is the co-founder of based-politics.com. Brad Polumbo joining us on the show this morning. Brad, how are you doing, sir? You beautiful, beautiful man.
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks.
Glad to have you here on the show, Brad. So I played the clips already, so our listeners already got to see you doing the smackdown, and you took on boomers, lefty boomers, and you also took on lefty Zoomers. The first clip that we played, though, was you talking about the national debt, and it seemed as if the people that you were speaking to were completely oblivious to the fact that their generations have run us into the ground. Your generation, my generation, into the ground. We've got to pay for it. The only problem was that the Zoomers who were there at their same age, they didn't seem to see any problem with it. But I mean, they're completely unrepentant. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think most boomers are unrepentant. They don't see any hypocrisy between the way that they yell free speech, except for when you burn a flag or want to build a mosque, or when they yell socialism sucks. And I agree with them, but then they want their Social Security, their Medicare, everything else paid for by young people, even though older people have, on average, higher net worths by a lot than younger people. So they don't see a hypocrisy there. I think they were kind of stunned to hear somebody present it to their face, because they have this stereotype, and it's somewhat true, of young people as avocado toast munching, entitled people. But I'm like, all right, but boomers are pretty entitled too. I mean, I get some hate for this, but I want to be clear, like, when we're talking about these generations or these groupings, it doesn't apply to any individual. There are lots of boomers or lots of Gen Z people who this doesn't apply to, but we're just speaking broadly about trends. And I think that is a safe assessment when it comes to the boomers. And they say, well, I didn't vote for that. Okay, but your generation did. And the people in power have been the older generations. The average age of Congress is higher than the average age at my local YMCA. And every time you go in a locker room there, it's just old dudes walking around naked. I mean, I'm telling you, the Congress is even more ancient than that. And yet you're going to say, oh, well, I didn't vote for this. All right, but your generations did. And you have to at least admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Brad Palumbo. He is the co-founder of based-politics.com. He went on the Dr. Phil show and he laid the smackdown on lefty boomers and zoomers. Now, when it comes to the amount of the national debt that has been laid at our feet, I'm a geriatric millennial. And so, I think my generation is going to be the first generation in decades that will actually live below the means of my parents' generation, Brad. And that's something that's deeply concerning to me. It's deeply concerning to my dad, who doesn't want to see, my generation going without. But the fact is that it's the government spending that's the problem. I mean, with $250,000 per head for national debt, I mean, we're never going to be able to pay this national debt off, are we?
No, and in fact, it's actually a ticking time bomb because it's been growing. I heard you mention earlier in the show how it was so much less back in 2008, and you thought it was a big deal then, right? But it's been growing exponentially, yet it hasn't blown up into a huge problem yet because the Federal Reserve has kept interest rates at near zero levels artificially for a very long time. But now that inflation is here and out of control, they're raising interest rates. What people don't realize is that the national debt, most of the debt, recalculates its interest rates about every 60 months. So with interest rates approaching eventually to stop inflation, they're going to probably end up north of 5, maybe up to 10%, as we saw, throughout much of American history until very recently. As soon as that happens, give it a couple of years, and then boom, the national debt will explode, and all of a sudden we will have to pay trillions and trillions and trillions every year in federal taxes just to cover the interest payments. It's like we've been running up a credit card payment. We've not even been making the minimum, and now the minimum is going to be here, and it's going to exponentially explode, and we're all going to have to pay more taxes and really have some reckoning here, and nobody's prepared for it because they've all just wanted to live beyond their means and stick it to future generations with, forget the economics, it's just immoral. If you want spending now, pay for it now. If you want spending in the future, have them pay for it in the future, but don't cash out today. I compare it to this. What would we think of parents who took out credit cards in their children's name and ran them up and left them to inherit it when they became adults? We would think those are pretty crappy parents. But when our government does that, we just say, oh yeah, okay, I guess that's just how this works. No, it's pretty crappy when they do it too.
Don't blame me. I voted for Ron Paul. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Brad Palumbo, who went on the Dr. Phil show and laid the smackdown on lefty boomers and zoomers. If you want, you can text the show this morning at 573-319-1586. Again, the text line is 573-319-1586. If you have a question for Brad, let us know. And then after that clip, we played the clip of you, Brad, talking to, I guess, not the Obama girl, but the OK Boomer girl. The OK Boomer girl who just, this poor girl, somebody needs to teach her how to do her makeup. I saw some of our live stream chatters were making fun of her a little bit earlier, but she wasn't the only one. There was some white liberal chick behind you who's got a lot of guilt. And you guys were talking about cancel culture and specifically that, people need to be canceled for their bigoted opinions. Now, Brad, you might agree that if somebody goes out there on some kind of weird anti-Semitic or homophobic rant or something like that, maybe it's not a good idea if you're an employer to keep that person on. But as Dr. Phil said, the bar just kind of keeps getting lower and lower for why we're firing people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not about that. Like, obviously, most people agree that Harvey Weinstein deserved to be canceled, right? There's some threshold for public behavior. But no one really says that. Cancel culture, we're talking about the minuscule infractions, the microaggressions, the one poorly worded tweet from 15 years ago, these kinds of things. When somebody is canceled or faces backlash or attempted backlash over that, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about this person, this guy works for me and is a Klansman, guess I shouldn't fire. Like, no, obviously, if he's literally an open Nazi, no one's saying that you can't fire that person, not be associated with them. But instead, you're saying, well, they called Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner in 2011 on Twitter before she even transitioned problematic, right? Like, just the extent to which we're digging up tiny things and parsing through. I also felt extremely gaslit in this exchange because it's just like, this isn't anything new. And it's like, sure, there are cancellations of a sort, 10, 20 years ago, but anybody telling you that it hasn't exponentially increased with the rise of social media and the amount of mob mentality that platforms like Twitter have enabled is lying through their teeth, or they're just completely in the dark about the reality all around us. Obviously, cancellations have exponentially increased with the spread of social media and the ability to share this information and to record everything and to take the worst 5 seconds of someone's life and make it the top Google result for them into eternity. Obviously, it has changed. So I felt gaslit. What these people really are afraid to say, or they don't want to say out loud, is yes, we support cancel culture because we are the ones who get to decide, because we're the woke people. Well, for now, one day it'll be them on the chopping block, not too far away, and I will just have nothing but delicious enjoyment for their tears. But yeah, I mean, I felt gaslit by these woke TikTokers. They're simultaneously arguing that cancel culture doesn't exist, it's nothing new, and that it's good progress. Those two things can't be true at one time.
If you're just tuning into the show, we're speaking to Brad Palumbo about his appearance on Dr. Phil, Boomers versus Zoomers. You can text the show 573-319-1586. Tony Allegra came in here to check my numbers. He sent me a text and said that the 2008 U.S. debt was $100K per taxpayer, and that in 1980, it was $12,000 per taxpayer. Tony, thank you very much for that correction on there. Appreciate you for that. But, you know, Brad, I hate to sound like a misogynist here or anything, but why is it that almost exclusively the realm of cancel culture is coming from white liberal females? What is this strange guilt that we get from the fairer sex? Is this just this postmodern feminist movement that has so brainwashed these women into thinking that they need to become, you know, the avatars of social justice? And you know, why is this almost an exclusively female phenomenon? Or do you disagree with me that it is?
I don't think that it's an exclusively female phenomenon. I think the faces of it are oftentimes, you know, woke young women. But that's just, I think, less about cancel culture and more about the woke identity politics in general, that like a straight white man is like not ever going to be elevated to a position of significance in that movement. Or if they are, then that's kind of hypocritical, right? Because it's like, what do they say? They're like, let other voices be heard, or like check yourself, know your privilege, all this stuff. I think that kind of groupthink doesn't really lend itself to having men leading the charge for your movement. And I think on TikTok especially, a lot of these is where these Gen Zers have built their claim to fame. There's definitely a lot of female influencers in the liberal space there. There are male ones as well, but why? I don't know. I think what they're really trying to do is, if you're a straight white liberal woman, you're like one step removed from the unthinkables, the straight white men, or even like gay white men are like the new problematic privileged class. They don't count as diversity anymore. But so white women, I think it's like they're afraid they're next, as this, you know, devouring monster that is woke insanity keeps moving closer and closer towards the, you know, everyone. But if they protest the loudest, if they cancel people the most, it won't come for them. But they're fooling themselves. It absolutely will. Victoria, the TikToker, who's just got almost 1 million TikTok followers, I'm just going to laugh one day when she says something mildly off the cuff or is caught on a hot mic that is just slightly offensive and she doesn't even mean it to, and all of a sudden #Victoria is over party is trending on TikTok and Twitter. I'm going to be sitting there with popcorn, just munching and just saying, oh, but it's nothing new. Oh, but this is just the consequences of your freedom of expression. And I'm just going to have an absolute field day.
Yeah, see, Brad, one of the things that has occurred to me, or that's sort of changed in my views in the last, you know, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years, has been just the amount of tolerance that I have for people who don't necessarily adhere to my ideological worldview 100%. Now, people like you and people like Hannah Cox and John Miltimore, you know, there are many warriors for our cause that are, you know, disruptors that are going out there, they're making a difference. When you go on Dr. Phil and you lay the smackdown on national TV like that, I'm cheering you on more than I cheer on others. But then you have other people out there who don't necessarily adhere to my worldview that I do see somewhat as disruptors, right? And I support them even though they don't necessarily completely share my worldview. And I wonder, you're probably going to disagree with me on this, and maybe it'll be an interesting conversation. I wonder what you've thought about Kanye West's rants lately, because I have to say that some of the stuff he's saying makes him sound crazier than a shithouse rat. And yet, he's acting as a disruptor in many ways. He's making people in power uncomfortable. He's making people that despise people like you and Hannah and myself very uncomfortable. So what's your take on what's been going on with Kanye? His interview on Tucker Carlson, what he said. Does he need to be canceled for what he said?
I don't think he needs to be canceled. I think he needs some mental health treatment. That's pretty clear. And he hasn't been taking it. And that's probably not the best for him or for anyone. I think that, unfortunately, he's crossed the line into some pretty strange anti-Semitism, right? When he says, I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews, like, huh? And then he starts talking about how black people are all actually Jewish, so I'm not anti-Semitic. He's lost the plot. And I think that's unfortunate because, to me, whatever force he was serving as a disruptor, and he's made some good points when he speaks out on different things, is then he's kind of tagging it with this cloud of, oh, he's just crazy and anti-Semitic, which I don't want to be tagged with.
Sure.
So I think that's pretty unfortunate.
But we criticize culture all the time. I mean, Jewish culture isn't above reproach, right? I mean, there's criticism enough to go around for any groups. Libertarians, we criticize.
Absolutely. But he's going off into crazy land with it. Like, he's talking about how it's the Jewish Zionists who are making Kim pose on magazines with her butt out, Kim Kardashian. It's like, no, it's not. It's Kim Kardashian and maybe her mom, who's been, selling her out for celebrity for a long time. But it's like, he's getting into these weird conspiracy.
What are people who are pro-Israel have to do with Kim showing her butt on Vogue magazine? Yeah.
Right. It's just weird. And I think that kind of thing distracts from any legitimate criticisms you might have of the state of Israel, which I'm certainly no expert in, but I think anti-Semitism is occasionally used kind of how, people on the left use us to shut down conversations or to shut down things. But also anti-Semitism is a thing. And some of what Kanye has been spewing is actually just unhinged anti-Semitism. And that's not productive for the conversation either. I don't want him to be canceled. I think he needs to stay offline for a while and seek some mental health treatment because clearly he's struggling. And I don't love that people are kind of it's human to don't look away from the train wreck. But people are kind of cashing out on clicks, to get him to say crazy stuff on their interview. And it's like, it's not what's best for him or anybody, really.
Yeah, good points there. Hey, Brad, have you got any more of those Dr. Phil clips? I've got a little bit of a Nick fit here. I need to see some more Brad Polumbo smackdowns on Dr. Phil. You got some more coming?
I do. I have a couple more clips on the vault. People should subscribe to my YouTube channel, Brad Polumbo, or my TikTok, also Brad Polumbo, and I will be dropping them there soon to much anticipation and fanfare. And I just have to say, Austin, I get the impression he's pretty guarded with his politics, but I get the impression that Dr. Phil is low-key based.
Oh, no. Well, I guess we'll have to have a follow-up interview with you, Brad, once you drop those clips. I can't wait to see those. I'm really excited. Follow Brad Polumbo on TikTok and on YouTube. Brad, thanks so much. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Very based. You can check out his website at based-politics.com. That's based-politics.com. Brad Polumbo. What did you think? Did you like him? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. And when we get back, we are going to talk about Kanye a little bit more. Is he going cray-cray? Does he need to be on his meds? Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit SaluteHeroes.org to learn more.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
Enough yet? Do facts no longer matter? Are lies to be encouraged instead of punished? This is not our inheritance. If truth no longer matters, we will not remain free for long. This is our generation's challenge, to defend our founders' hope that we the people could self-govern if we defend our right to get the facts. And right now, we're building the only defense of free people have. The facts on every politician, every position they held, every statement they've made, every vote they've made, and any cash they've taken. It's the real history on those now pandering for your vote. There are hundreds of young people building our defense right now, and they need your help. We all have our passions, but as our ancestors knew, when events become so foul they threaten us all, we must stand and defend each other. Please, have our backs. Join us at votesmart.org.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
It's me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Halloween is coming. The festival of Samhain approaches, and your lazy butt doesn't have a Halloween costume yet? How can you pledge allegiance to the Dark Lord this year and possibly offend everyone at the same time? Visit the AP for Liberty shop and get your shirt today. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. So grab your government is scary tea and tell everyone at the party that you're here to help. Other great seasonal items are available as well, so don't miss out. And visit AP for Liberty Shop today. That's apforlibertyshop.com.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson, and you're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Free speech versus defamation. What we say, can it be held against us? Well, if you're Alex Jones, apparently so. Democrats can say whatever they want. They can spread, Donald Trump stole the election from Hillary Clinton in 2016. If conservatives try and say it back, well, they need to be suppressed online. Let's talk about this nearly $1 billion judgment with my good friend, the judge. His name is Judge Andrew Napolitano. He is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your favorite podcasting networks. And he is also the author of a weekly column, which you can read at judgenap.com. He's joining us right now, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Good morning, Judge. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Austin, my dear friend. Thanks for having me with you. I look forward to these Wednesday mornings. There was emptiness in my heart last week when you were away.
Thank you, Judge. We're glad to have you here. The story of the day is nearly $1 billion will be extracted from Alex Jones if this verdict is upheld in the case of Sandy Hook parents who sued him for defamation. My father, contacted me about this last week and said that, he's no big Alex Jones fan, but something just doesn't sit well with him about this. And I sort of feel the same way, Judge. What are your thoughts on this case? You think that this will be upheld?
I don't think it will be upheld, but it's going to have to go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, because without getting too into the weeds, the judicial system in the state of Connecticut has carved out an Alex Jones exception to the general protection, the First Amendment protection for the expression of opinions. So everybody knows what we're talking about. We're talking about a monumental tragedy and horrific crime where a crazy young man took a weapon that he found in his parents' home and slaughtered 20 children and 6 adults at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Alex Jones expressed the opinion that this was staged, but who believes the government anyway? Why should we believe them now? And he threw out some snippets of odd behavior by the people surrounding this to support the opinion. Of course, it wasn't staged. It was real. There was real suffering, real death, real horror, real terror. But Alex Jones expressed an opinion on a matter of public interest. The matter of public interest was a public massacre, the right to keep and bear arms, mental health, safety in schools, free speech. And when the parents, the surviving parents of these slaughtered children, sued Alex Jones for defamation and for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and Jones's lawyers moved to dismiss the complaint on the grounds that his speech was protected by the First Amendment, as all opinions are when you give a reason for the opinion. I'm going to jump aside for a minute. The value of an opinion on a matter of public interest challenges the orthodox belief in the matter of public interest and causes people to look at it in a different way. And that advances the goals of democracy, which is public policy based on an examination of all issues. That's the reason that we protect opinion. But when Alex Jones moved to dismiss the case and somebody planted child pornography in the digitized version of the documents that Alex Jones was compelled to send to the plaintiffs, and Jones accused the plaintiff's lawyers of doing it, the judge was so outraged at this, not at the presence of child pornography, but at Alex's allegation that the plaintiff's lawyers had planted it, that she denied the motion to dismiss, not on the merits. She didn't examine the law. She didn't examine the Supreme Court opinions. She didn't examine what I just explained is the reason why opinions are protected. She sounded like George Orwell when she said, this is not an opinion, it's a non-opinion, and therefore it's not protected. And the Supreme Court of Connecticut, in a 7-0 vote, upheld that. So there never was a trial on the merits. There never was a legal argument on the merits. There was just a judicial determination that what Alex said was so outrageous that it's a non-opinion, therefore it's not protected, therefore he loses as a matter of law, therefore the only issue is how much money does he owe? And between the 2 trials over what he owes, one in Austin, Texas, and one in New Haven, Connecticut, the total that he owes, if this is not interrupted or interfered with by saner judicial heads, is $1 billion for expressing an opinion. Now, you and I and a lot of our colleagues are in the opinion expressing business. Should we be afraid to express an opinion? Well, yes. I mean, Alex never set foot in Connecticut. He gives his broadcast in Texas. Yet because he was sued in this hard left state that doesn't care about freedom of speech and where the judges are properly elected and they want to ride the crest of the wave of popular opinion, public opinion, which in this case was to demonize Alex, they'll change the law to suit public opinion. They'll eviscerate somebody of their basic natural and constitutional rights, and a profound injustice will result. I'm sorry for such a long-winded answer, but the public needs to know what happened here. This was not a trial on the merits. This was a summary determination by a political hack in a black robe who simply said, this is a non-opinion. George Orwell warned about the change in human life because of the change in the meaning of words.
Yeah, Judge, we love to have you on the show, and certainly we bring you here on to hear your opinions on that one. So, rant all you want for as long as you want. It also gives me a nice little break. You can send a text to the show. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. One listener texted in with a question here, Judge, a statement, but I think it actually leads to a good question. He said, Alex Jones said the parents were lying, though. There is the defamation component. Is that the case?
That's the case as the plaintiffs see it. The case as the Constitution sees it is that free speech trumps these defamation rights because it's a matter of public interest about which you can say anything. If this were a private matter and he accused the parents of lying, that would be a different story. But when the parents go on public on the public airways themselves in order to affect the public opinion, they are what's called limited purpose public figures, and they are fair game. And opinion allows you to say whatever you want. A person whose philosophical works you and I admire very much, though he was an economist, the late great Professor Murray Rothbard, argued that there should be no libel, slander, and defamation cases, that you should literally be able to say whatever you want, and ideas and thoughts should rise in the marketplace of ideas, not in a courtroom. I'm not quite there. Before I was on the bench, my career was devoted to defending the First Amendment rights of media publications, and I defended publications from the New York Times down to an old left-wing rag called the Soho News. By the way, I became great friends with the people that ran that thing. But the issue is, which is the greater good? The salvation of a person's reputation, or the freedom to speak your mind on a matter of public interest? And in my view, the Supreme Court in Brandenburg, which is the leading Supreme Court case that the Connecticut courts rationalize themselves around, says the greater good is the right to speak your mind on a matter of public interest.
Now, Judge, knowing that the possibility is that this could go to the Supreme Court, and knowing the ideological makeup of the Supreme Court, do you think that there's a good chance that this will be overturned and that Alex will be exonerated?
I do. This court has been very, very pro First Amendment. And the leader of that First Amendment movement on the court is the Chief Justice. So I think he would clearly be with the conservatives. There might even be one or two from the left wing of the court who will see this purely as a matter of free speech rather than as a matter of public outrage. If public outrage is the standard, then you and I are, and all of our colleagues, from Alex Jones to Tim Pool to Joe Rogan to Dave Rubin, we're all out of business, because we're in the business of stirring the pot and causing people to look at issues from a human rights. The human is responsible. Government is the negation of liberty from that perspective. So the First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech from all levels of government, local, state, federal, and from all branches of the government, legislative, executive, judicial. Okay, a judge can stop you from giving a speech in the courtroom. The police can stop you from using a sound truck in a residential neighborhood at 3 a.m. I get it. There's a time, place, and manner for speech. But on your own show, on a matter of public interest, you should be free to speak your mind. That's not me. That's Brandenburg versus Ohio, the seminal Supreme Court opinion on this.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano. He is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your devices, as well as a weekly column at judgenap.com. His column this week will deal with this issue we're discussing right now. Now, Judge, I'm not sure if you're as familiar with Kanye West now being sued by the family of George Floyd for his comments. Kanye West came out this week and said that George Floyd died of fentanyl poisoning, not because, Derek Chauvin put his knee on his neck. He's now being sued for $100 million by the family of George Floyd. Do you have an opinion on that case?
It should be summarily dismissed for two reasons. One, it's an opinion on a matter of public interest. Two, George Floyd's family has already, they've suffered greatly, but they've already experienced their increase in wealth from the city of Minneapolis because of what happened. So they have no losses. George Floyd is dead. And there's really no cognizable plaintiff in this case. If they think a dead man's reputation is worth money when they've already been paid for his death, that's a bizarre twist on the law. As for the substance of what he said, there's some evidence for that. The substance of what he said was offered in the defense case. I believe that the defendant was quite properly convicted and quite properly sentenced, and his behavior was horrific, murderous, and both outcomes were just. The civil case brought by the George Floyd family and the criminal case brought by the feds and the state, although I'm not in favor of the feds and the state bringing criminal cases on the same matter. I think that's a violation of double jeopardy. Nevertheless, the first case, the state case, produced a just outcome. But you can't defame the dead. That's clear in American jurisprudence.
Yes, and that if you could defame the dead, then everything we've said about FDR would get us in a lot of trouble. If you're just tuning into the show, we're just speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano right now, and you can text us at 573-319-1586 if you have a question for the judge. Judge, I'd like to delve into big brain territory, to go back into like a philosophical discussion, especially specifically related to Alex Jones. I'm not sure if you heard some of the comments that he made recently. He went on a show with Steven Crowder, another conservative pundit, and they both came out very recently, very strongly against libertarians, people like you and me. Alex Jones said specifically that because of the behavior of libertarians in recent years, that he and Steven Crowder agreed with him, are now anti-libertarians, opposed to libertarianism. Yeah, and I see your facial expression on that. It was something that I guess didn't surprise me, because we've seen a lot of people, Judge, that came in during the Ron Paul years turn against us, turn against our ideas, and join this new populist movement because they claim that libertarianism doesn't offer the kind of strength that's needed to fight, in the face of leftist tyranny, that the answer to it is a form of right-wing tyranny. Alex Jones has embraced this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't know that he had done that, and I'm sorry to hear it. I think I know him pretty well, and his views are quite libertarian. He may disagree with the, if you'll forgive this phrase, mainstream libertarian movements in the country, the remnants of the Ron Paul movement, this crowd that wants to run Dave Smith for president of the United States. Nothing against Dave. I love the guy, but I think that's the people that he is the group that he's objecting to. But in turn, and I can't really get into his head on this, Alex sometimes changes his mind. He and I disagreed profoundly on whether Donald Trump was worthy to be president from the basis of his human character. Alex now says that Donald Trump is not worthy to be president on the basis of his human character, not on the basis of his views. I mean, I've disagreed with libertarians on this, calling Trump an authoritarian, which is the opposite of a libertarian. But we know that if you reject the idea of natural human rights, that our rights come from our humanity, that the highest right is the right to live, that the individual is sovereign and not the state, that government consists of negating liberty, that government is just a monopoly of force in a geographical area. This brings you to totalitarianism. This brings you to the march away from liberty, which Jefferson predicted in one of his last letters to John Adams shortly before the two of them died, and which we have seen as a steady, slow march ever since then. Government grows and liberty shrinks. Without a liberty movement, without people who recognize that the individual is sovereign and not the state, democracy will fall. of its own weight. People will use the government to grab as many goodies as they can from everybody else, and there will be no liberty left. And then we'll start all over again. Your grandchildren may very well see the collapse of the federal government and the country breaking off into smaller republics. And because they will have been taught by you, they will know to go to the republic where there's the most liberty.
Judge, and one final sort of conversation, starter on this one before I let you go. Again, big brain stuff, so the kind of insider knowledge that I think, that you don't get in a lot of other podcasts. But have you noticed this, Judge? This is an observation that I've made, and I've been, fighting for liberty for about 15 years now, since I, first got into the movement to support Congressman Ron Paul. But what I noticed is
many of those happy years we fought side by side.
That's right, and we still are, Judge. But one of the things that I notice is that you'll have people who will come into the libertarian movement, and they will get frustrated with the amount of progress that's being made over, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and they will then go and embrace authoritarianism. They will go and embrace authoritarian ideologies, and they will come in as libertarians, but they will go out as authoritarians. Is this a trend that you have noticed as well? Because it's deeply concerning to me to see so many former friends, looking at us as if we are naive for holding on to these principles of liberty that they claim to espouse, but because the timeline hasn't been fast enough, they go and embrace, either left-wing socialism or right-wing socialism.
I'm sorry to say that I agree with you. They are tired of waiting for the government to be dialed back, and so they want their share of goodies that government gives away. I think a lot of people on January 6th were libertarians who just had lost their patience, and they were willing to engage in violence in order to prevent the peaceful transfer of government. I was ashamed of them and deeply disappointed when I learned that I knew some of them. I don't know what the answer to this is, Austin, other than the patient discussion of these things like we're doing now. But libertarianism in the modern era in America was at its peak when it had a hero, and the hero was utterly, utterly faithful to first principles, and that was Ron Paul. Now, Ron Paul is semi-retired now, and I'm sorry to say that libertarianism needs another hero. The reason I say I'm sorry to say it is that I don't believe in the great man version of liberty, because that leads to too much power in the hands of the great man. But a truly great man would lead his people to a place of liberty and then eschew the power that they want to give to him, because power resides and comes from the human heart. It doesn't come from the collective.
This is the Cincinnatus theory of government, right? The George Washington theory of government. And this really is the heart of it, Judge. You've nailed this, because I've been trying to have this discussion with so many former libertarians, calling themselves now populists or national conservatives, because they say that what's the point of having power if you don't use it? They look at conservatives and libertarians who gain power, who win elections, who then don't go out there and force their vision of society on others. And they claim that people like us are weak, because they say, what's the point of having power if you don't use it? But I mean, they don't think about what George Washington did. They don't think of the the society of Cincinnatus, right? And that story. But I mean, that truly is what separates the good men from evil, isn't it? Isn't that the basis for what we determine, who are the good guys versus the bad guys?
I'll give you a good example today of an heir to Ron Paul, and that's Congressman Thomas Massie. Congressman Thomas Massie is so faithful to first principles, even if what the Congress is attempting to do is objectively correct, proper, and good. If it's not authorized by the Constitution, Congressman Massie will vote against it. So the libertarians that have left the movement to become national conservatives, a phrase that terrifies me because it's got intimations of telling people how to live, in their hearts would agree with Massie. But Massie is a superb gold standard example of eschewing power, not using power to tell others how to live, but keeping power in its place. Ron Paul was the same. There are very, very few human beings. You know, the traditional Christians believe that Jesus on the cross eschewed power. He could have used his power to slay his enemies, but he didn't, because he knew greater good would come from his own sacrifice. Thomas Massey, Ron Paul, you or I, if we were voting with them, would be of the same view. We're not going to tell people how to live. We're not going to disrupt the federal structure. We're not going to take back human liberty because we have a better idea of life than others do. The individual is sovereign. The government is a negation of liberty. That government is best, which governs least, and that government is better, which governs not at all.
Absolutely. That's Judge Andrew Napolitano, the host of the Judging Freedom Podcast.
I took Jefferson to an extreme.
That is great stuff, Judge. We love you very much.
What an intellectual feast it is to have these conversations with you, Austin, as we once had at your cubicle or at my couch at Fox News for a couple of years.
Maybe again one day. Judge Napolitano, host of the Judging Freedom Podcast. You can download it on any of your mobile devices. Read his weekly column at judgenap.com. Judge, thank you for your time today.
All the best, Austin. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake, yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes, you like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
the real-world experience.
It's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway.
I need help.
You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Today marks the beginning of a series of scripted segments devoted to detailing the history of the evils of government. My first story details the all-too-common scenario of how some policies with the best of intentions only perpetuate the evils that they claim to attempt to end. This first story deals with a eugenics policy that existed from the late 1800s to the mid-1970s. This is a story of ugly laws. In 1916, a Portland woman called Mother Hastings was told by authorities that she was, quote, too terrible a sight for children to see. The LA Times reported in 1917 that her crippled hands had disgusted members of her community, and she was given money to leave town. She complied, but sadly, Los Angeles was considering enacting their own version of this law that had restricted her access to urban space in Portland. Ugly laws were municipal statutes in the United States that outlawed the appearance in public of people who were, quote, diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object, end quote. That was verbatim from the Chicago City Code of 1881. These laws targeted those with disabilities, the homeless, and vagrants, and were actively enforced and written from the American Civil War to World War I. And they were part of ideas which had become popular during the Progressive Era. That included forced sterilization and the beginning widespread normalization of the eugenic procedure of abortion. Forced sterilization continued in the United States until the early 1990s, and of course, abortion continues to this day in certain states. The first of these laws came about in San Francisco in 1867 to, quote, prohibit street begging and to restrain certain persons from appearing in streets and public places. But the words to describe people as, quote, disgusting objects were common in laws that were spread as far and wide as Portland, Denver, Lincoln, Omaha, New York, Manila, and Reno. The entire state of Pennsylvania even enacted such a law in 1891. Now, the laws were mainly meant to prevent people with visible disabilities from hanging out in public spaces or asking for money, but of course, the wording and function, just like the sterilization laws, gave power and license to those with sinister intent. Of course, being ugly was only a crime if you were poor. There was never any attempt to uniformly enforce the laws. There was only a want to have a pretext with which to remove people from public spaces if their presence offended those in power. It wasn't until the 1970s, after a man was arrested in Omaha for violating an ugly law, that the push started for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Ugly laws would be the pretext for government to step in and do something to prevent these horrible acts of discrimination against the poor, disabled, and sick. It became a legend at that time to spread the idea that the laws had begun in Chicago, aimed at preventing those in P.T. Barnum's freak show from eating at diners or otherwise being in public. But ugly laws had existed for far longer than the famous freak shows, whose entertainers absolutely suffered discrimination at the hands of these ugly laws. Disability activists used stories like these to demand the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and in 1990, it was signed into law by George Herbert Walker Bush. Now, the law, in theory, provided protections to those with disabilities similar to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But in a completely predictable move, the ADA, as it is known, has been weaponized by governments against the very people that it was meant to protect. In Portland, Oregon, civic representatives now use the ADA to chase off beggars. The, quote, sidewalk management plan was pushed by then-Mayor Sam Adams to create a, quote, pedestrian use zone with a justification basis in the ADA. The claim, of course, is that beggars and homeless people are obstructing passage on the sidewalks, and the ADA gives them the legal ability to persecute the poor and the homeless. Now, in an ironic twist of fate, the law that was passed and meant to protect people like Mother Hastings would now be used against people just like her. Now, it's a natural impulse to wish to have orderly and clean streets, but the reliance on the belief that government can solve the problem that government creates is naive. The laws are aimed at punishing homeless, not providing handicapped people with more space to maneuver on sidewalks, because Portland sidewalks are littered with sandwich boards, magazine racks, cafe tables, and all sorts of other obstructions. And yet none of those were targeted as needing to be moved, only ugly people who are too poor to defend themselves. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed with the best of intentions, and by bleeding heart Republicans calling themselves compassionate conservatives. And of course, those who oppose the ADA, or who think it even now tends to do the opposite of what it claims, are painted as heartless. Much like the Patriot Act and Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act is named in such a way as to make anyone who might oppose a law out to be some kind of unpatriotic or unfeeling monster. And of course, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the ADA is being used to do the opposite of what it claims to fix. In reality, the government is, has, and always seems to be the true monster and threat to our natural rights.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Do not come. Do not come.
Have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company?
You know, I don't know as a fact, but I doubt it.
Well, here's the thing is, why don't you let us know?
Good morning, Austin. How's it going?
Going great. Glad to have you here. When I sent you this topic yesterday, I don't have the text message pulled up, but I mean, it took you a little while to respond, but then you said, oh my God, or like some kind of WTF kind of response to this topic. When Megyn Kelly said yesterday on her show that if her husband was going to cheat on her, that she would rather have him cheat on her physically than emotionally. Well, when I asked my wife, Stephanie, about that question, she did not have the exact same response as Megyn Kelly did. What was your response to this, Laura?
Yeah, you're playing with fire there, Austin. I'll actually say that the interview prep for this interview was really healthy for my marriage because Megyn Kelly was talking about in the context of how do you pronounce it? Giselle and Tom Brady getting a divorce. And so they were speculating that Tom Brady there was infidelity going on. And so that was the context of the interview. And so I was telling my husband Jace about this and prep for this interview. And he reassured me several times before this morning that I was hotter than Giselle and that all of his emotional needs are met and that there's nothing to worry about. So thank you for that. But I wonder if my response is similar to Stephanie's, because I was thinking about the question, like if I had to choose, like obviously the ideal is that there's no cheating happening. But if I had to pick, the emotional infidelity is bad, but not for the same reason that this person in the interview with Megyn Kelly was suggesting. Like if I found out my husband was crying with another woman, I would just be embarrassed for myself that I was married to such a guy that would have to go and get his emotional needs met and go cry with another woman. But like, I mean, that's just sad for me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yes. However, let me just interject on that and say, if he feels the need to cry with another woman, he doesn't feel comfortable with that, doing that in front of you, that indicates that there is a serious problem there because, as a man, it's difficult enough to release your emotions at all. You certainly don't want to do that publicly because of the backlash. I was just talking to my buddy Ian Smith about how men sort of police masculinity, but I mean, women police masculinity too in displaying their, like, just like you did, kind of their disgust with men showing their emotions in a way, right?
Yeah. And that's a fair point. So also if he feels like, and you're right. So in agreement, like if he feels like he can't cry in front of me, we obviously have problems in our marriage. But if he cheats on me in terms plus like the sexual, the intimacy, then that means, and if we're talking about like base instinct here, that means that he's rejected my sexual appeal, which means that he's rejected his desire to have children with me. Like that's what this all is about at the end of the day. That's fundamental.
Okay, sure. It is to an extent, but I think here's the problem, and I know some men will disagree with me, but I think I can safely say in general that it is possible for men to have a physical entanglement that doesn't involve any kind of an emotional attachment. And again, some guy disagreed with me this morning and said the opposite, that he doesn't think it's possible to have a physical attachment without an emotional attachment. I'm telling you, it absolutely is possible. I mean, I
don't think we're in a disagreement there for men. For women, it's different. Yeah.
Are you sure? I mean, maybe for the vast majority of women, but I mean, I have known women who have met a man and within 5 minutes or less, they're having sex with him, in a closet or in a bedroom or something like that at a party, and they literally just met them, Laura. And it's so. I mean, I'm not saying that all women necessarily are like that, but I mean, a lot of women are like that, Laura.
Do you think they're doing that because they need to get off, or do you think that they're doing it because they want like the validation?
Well,
I think the latter.
Well, maybe both. But I mean, even if they want the validation, that doesn't require any kind of an emotional attachment for you and the other person, right? It's just like, you're just validating. I'm hot. I think I'm hot. I'm hot. He thinks I'm hot. And, yeah, I'm going to get off. But like, really, this is about me feeling good about the fact that the hottest guy at this party wants me.
But that's an intrinsic value for a woman to be hot. It means that she's secure, she's safe. I've got some guy who's attracted to me. He's going to protect me and the kin, and we're going to be good to go through the night. We're going to wake up and we're going to be safe. So that's the kind of validation I'm talking about.
Okay, so all right, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Liberty Laura about one of the most uncomfortable topics we've ever breached on the Wake Up America show.
Oh, I like it.
It's a good one. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you on this one. And the question is would you prefer, if your spouse is going to cheat, I know you don't want them to cheat, but if they were going to cheat, would you prefer that it was a physical cheating or an emotional cheating? Now, when it comes to the emotional cheating thing, I mean, it's funny to think about your man like crying with another woman, but I mean, that's kind of like, the parody of that kind of a thing. What we're really talking about here is like, when we say intimacy, I know people think sex, but I mean, like, there are emotional relationships that I have had with women that never entered into the physical realm, that were, unparalleled depth of emotions and complications and complexities. And I don't have any of those relationships now, but I can say that, if I did have that kind of a relationship with a woman now, I would completely understand why a woman would feel more threatened by that than a physical relationship, because like the physical is visceral. So you have like that very strong emotional reaction to it. But I think I absolutely understand what Megyn Kelly is talking about. Maybe a lot of men aren't able to sort of communicate the complexities of the relationships they have with women as much as women are more, vocal and can communicate that. But I think I agree with Megyn that is definitely a much bigger threat to a marriage than just some physical relationship, even if it, gives you that kind of a visceral reaction. I mean, can you see why though?
Yes. And the way that I see this, in the context that I see this now, maybe it's my life stage. A lot of my friends are getting married. I'm recently married. This isn't an intimate relationship, but I see this strain happen with husbands, especially new husbands, and their moms. If they have a really good relationship with their mother, there becomes this strain during the leave and cleave process that should take place when a man gets married, and he should leave and he should cleave from his parents, his primary family, to some degree, in a healthy way. But eventually there's usually a loyalty test. It often comes up around kids or wedding planning, if not, before then. And the husband has to decide whose opinion he values more. Is it his mom's opinion or is it his wife's opinion? And that's a big conflict because, and I'm a mom to sons, so I'm like speaking and like, don't be the crazy mother-in-law in the future. Don't be the crazy mother-in-law in the future. But I can see both sides about how that was hard. My husband and I, we had to set boundaries in place. Be like, listen, when we're sitting down for dinner, just tell your mom we'll call her back. Love your mom. I got super lucky in the mother-in-law roulette.
Mm-hmm.
I have to call her back. She's like a mother to me now, but still there has to be very clear priorities. And we even talked about this in premarital counseling. Like, this is a recurring issue. And that's obviously not a sexual relationship. It's an emotional one. So yes, I can see how there's tension there.
See, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a different kind. I'm not like your normal, average guy in the way that I think about things and the way I approach my relationships. I'm much more of kind of like an open heart, heart on my sleeve type of a guy. Chris Morrill over in the Facebook live stream says spilling guts is bad, spilling bodily fluids is worse. Just my 2 cents. See, I just don't see it that way because of, the sort of the value that I place on a relationship with a woman. And when I have this relationship, it is so intense and emotional to me. I wouldn't say spiritual because I don't look at things that way, but to me, the emotional relationship that I have with a woman is so much bigger and so much more important than sex. And a lot of people disagree. Over on the YouTube channel this morning, the Landlord Harassment Channel, that's a funny name, says there's no such thing as emotional cheating. That's a term coined by the left. I totally disagree. What do you think? You can emotionally cheat, right? Yeah. What would you consider emotional cheating? Yeah, go ahead. Tell your story.
Let me tell a story. This is good background. Okay. One of the first dates that I went on with my husband, if you can call it that, before we were married, he made me, I was saying the same thing that you're saying. What are you talking about? Very like pick me vibes. I'm a guy's girl. I've had relationship with men my whole life that have been platonic. There's been nothing happening. And he goes, yeah, okay, Laura, that's for you. But for them, it's different. And so one of our first dates, he drugged me to his bachelor pad not dragged me to his bachelor pad, to be very clear. In Virginia, and we watched Harry Met Sally. I had never seen that movie. That was one of our very first dates. We did not sit on the same couch. I was mad to be even watching the whole thing. But the theme here is that I eventually married my husband because he like calls me out on my BS when I'm wrong. But so he made me watch Harry Met Sally, and I'll never forget this because I had never considered this before. And when we turned the movie off, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Oh my God, everything's a lie." Like, my relationship with men that I had previously, like you discussed, most of them generally, I thought were just these like platonic friendships. But then I think about it and I'm like, oh, maybe there was something else going on their end, not mine. I just think you run the risk. And when you're married, I don't think it's worth running that risk. You run the risk of, and it's not a guarantee, but if you have these deep emotional relationships with women, people of the opposite sex, you run the risk that you'll offend your wife. She's primary. You run the risk that you're going to get in some entanglement with the other party that's not your wife. You run the risk that it'll change for you.
One of the challenges, now that I've been married, our first anniversary is coming up here just the end of this month. One of the things that the challenges that I have is I've always had really good, healthy relationships with women, not in like a guy's girl kind of a way, but I mean, like, for example, like you and I have had a healthy friendship, right? And I have a lot of people in my life that are kind of like you, where it's like, they're women, but we've never dated. It's always been platonic, but it's a very complex and interesting and engaging relationship. And so now that I'm married, I find myself in a situation where I have to be careful about that. And I don't even, and because I don't know what really the boundaries are for what could be considered cheating. Because like, if I'm having a direct message, a DM chat with someone, like yourself, that, we have this kind of like, we have inside jokes and we have all this, like banter and things like that, yeah, I have that with my wife, but I mean, like every relationship is different. And now I guess I ask myself, like, how do you know when you're emotionally cheating, right? Well, like at what point is it become emotionally cheating? Is it, if that conversation were to enter the realm of the sexual, then it, obviously is. But I mean, like, how would you even define emotional cheating, I guess?
I think it becomes emotional cheating when it becomes secret, when there's deceit involved. And there was a recent scandal of a prominent Christian pastor, and I'm not familiar with his name at the moment, but he got in trouble because he was Instagram messaging a female friend of his. And there was banter involved, there were jokes involved. and someone got a hold of these messages and tried to call him out and tried to create a scandal. And both spouses on the message recipient's end and then the pastor's end were both like, this is not a scandal. We both knew what was going on. We were aware that they were talking to each other. There was no problem. Cheating is defined between two spouses. And so long as you're sharing that information between the two of you and there's no deceit happening, it's not cheating, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good definition because, like I said to Stephanie when we first started, dating, and then talking about getting married, I was like, just so if you ever want to read my DMs, they are open to you, but I never check hers because I trust her completely. We're just not the jealous type, but I can see that, yeah, when it starts to be something that you would hide from the other person, that's when like some kind of emotional cheating is going on. But I guess in terms of like getting over it, it just seems to me, and I know that you're going to disagree with me on this. It just seems to me that if you want to repair a relationship, a marriage, then like sexually, it's just like it's whatever. Emotionally, it would seem like much harder to break the bonds and to recover from an emotional cheating than from a physical cheating. Do you think I'm wrong?
I think you're right. I think a lot of it also is about life stage. And I'm going to use I'm going to go back to Gisele and Tom Brady to use this as an example. They're going through a divorce. Nobody really knows why. It's not clear. And I was just reading the reports. And again, maybe it's because of my season of life, but I'm looking at it. They've got two kids together. They're ages 9 and 12. There's another kid as the result of a relationship on his end, his ex. And Gisele is the stepmom of this third child. He said he was going to quit football, and then he went back to football. Gisele's a hot girl with twice the net worth of his. She's got staff. She's got everybody. But this is an example that money doesn't buy everything. I think she just wants her husband back. And I think Tom Brady is emotionally cheating with football. And I think there's this term that's thrown around parent circles a lot, and it's called default parenting. It's whoever is the default parent has the biggest burden of child rearing. So whoever the children call for in the middle of the night when they need someone, whoever makes the doctor's appointment, whoever clips the nails, whoever can't take a break, because without them, the children would not survive. That's exhausting. And so he's always doing football. And Gisele's like, I'm tired. I'm 45. I want my husband back. The kids are old, a little bit older. They're not little kids anymore. So she probably set an ultimatum. I read yesterday she even saged her car. She had like some spiritual healer come out. This girl's done. She's saging her car. She's done. She wants her husband back. If he's not going to be there, she's cutting ties.
Are you the default parent, Laura?
I am in the degrees that are biologically not changeable. So like breastfeeding until my husband can start lactating, that's on me. Until he can bear a child, though the media tells me he can. It hasn't worked yet. That's on me. But we basically run a 50-50 household, and it's awesome. I would highly recommend it.
If you're just texting or listening to the show, you can text in 573-319-1586. We're speaking to Laura Lington. Camelia Peterson over on the live stream says maybe part of this is also partners having the expectation that the other person, quote, completes them in some way. Not sure what you mean with that. You could maybe be a little bit more specific, Camelia. Chris Morrill on the live stream says, I'm thinking of a 4-letter word that was popular in MAGA world, rhymes with duck. Pretty sure we know what you're talking about. Tony Allegra agrees with you and says he agrees that cheating requires hiding. What do you think? Again, send us a text, 573-319-1586. In terms of like, the back on the earlier topic of, kind of like the policing of his masculinity in the sense that if he's crying with another woman, that would be something that you would, look down on. I mean, how do you get Jace, I guess, since we've already named him, how do you sort of like, do you have to like get him to open up to you emotionally, or does he do that naturally to you? Like, because it would seem to me that in order to avoid, emotional cheating down the line, it's probably incumbent on the woman to initiate a lot of those kinds of conversations or to kind of like draw it out. Do you feel like you have to draw it out of him or not?
In some ways, yes. And in some ways, no. And I know that it's not a fun, satisfying answer. and our background has a lot to do with it. I grew up in a house where we did not talk about emotion. We did not talk about spiritual things. We did not talk about any of that. We weren't vulnerable. It's hard for me to be vulnerable in some rights. Like, I will come to him at the end of the day and I'll just let it pile up and be like, I'm a mess. I can't sleep. I'm done. And he'll be there for me 100%. He's more of the, like, doesn't keep it bottled up. He's a little bit more emotionally intelligent than I am, and will, as things come, express them to me, and I'll be like, I get over it. But the point about marriage, the whole thing about marriage is that we're supposed to make each other better. So I better in ways, but in this particular way, he does make me better. And we are raising our boys to say, hey, it's okay to cry. If you need to cry, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, well, just be careful, because...
Just don't do it with another woman when you're married.
All right, that's Liberty Laura Lington. Great interview on this show. Laura, is there anything else that you think our listeners should know before I let you go?
So I used to work in Congress. That's where you and I met. Austin was in D.C. So I used to work in the House of Representatives as a communications director. I've since quit that job, and now I run my own political newsletter that's an alternative to binging Fox News and CNN and Reddit for several hours a day. It's a political news aggregation service, email-based. You can sign up at billbrief.com, and you'll get a 7-day free trial, billbrief.com. I gather all the news for you, do all the research, summarize it for you, put in links, and it's all packaged with a pretty bow, and it's delivered to your email inbox 3 times a week.
Great stuff. Laura Lington, that was an awesome interview. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate our platonic relationship that we have going for us.
Me too. It's a very good platonic relationship.
Morning again in America. Our country is prouder and stronger and better.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.